Hi, Janine. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I know you've been really busy, and in particular around the big announcement about the International Sustainability Standards Board and the Value Reporting Foundation merging. So I was hoping we could start off maybe having you talk about the ISSB and your role in it.
Sure. So the International Sustainability Standards Board is going to be set up as a sister board to the IASB, the International Accounting Standards Board, and it will focus on sustainability disclosure, and it will focus on sustainability disclosure through the lens of enterprise value. And what that means is sustainability disclosure targeted by companies to investors as the user of the information, and talking about how sustainability issues impact the value of companies over time.
Great. And I know I'm excited about this announcement, but I'm curious what you're hearing from the investor community.
We have heard overwhelmingly positive feedback from the investor community. In fact, it's exceeded my wildest expectations. And I think as many people know, this push for improved ESG or sustainability disclosure over the last few years has been very, very strongly driven by investors. And investors particularly are strong advocates for global standards because they have global portfolios. And so they are generally thrilled with the ISSB as a significant step towards global standards.
That's fantastic to hear. And how are you thinking that the ISSB will help to improve the existing and future of sustainability reporting?
I think the reason, and for those of you who know the Value Reporting Foundation and the fact that the Value Reporting Foundation was the aggregation of the SASB standards and the integrated reporting framework, and we will now form part of the ISSB. If you go all the way back to the roots of integrated reporting and the SASB standards, both were very much focused on mimicking the processes and the concepts around financial accounting standards. And what financial accounting standards did, today we take them for granted, like they've been around forever. They haven't been. They're a relatively recent invention through the 1930s. But what financial accounting standards did is they created a common language between businesses and investors to talk about financial performance. And what we're hoping that the ISSB can accomplish is to create a common language between businesses and investors to talk about performance on sustainability issues, and especially to talk about the connection between sustainability performance and long-term value of businesses.
That makes a lot of sense. I've been joking recently that I feel like we're in a world where we're trying to create a cost accounting system, write generally accepted accounting principles, and implement SOX controls over all of this sustainability information. And the landscape just keeps moving every day. But one of the ways, obviously, as coming at this as an auditor, is looking at assurance and what value assurance might bring to this process as things change. So curious to think how you to hear about how you think about internal and external assurance around sustainability reporting.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about assurance, but before I do that, I want to say I love your cost accounting analogy because I've used that. And whenever people talk about can we get one single global standard and one sort of answer that will meet all needs for sustainability disclosure, I always say no, because to me, you have to come back to information is, in order to have relevant information, you have to understand the user of your information and the use case. And the reality is there are many, many, many use cases of sustainability information. And to me, there's a huge analogy in accounting where you have cost accounting for a certain purpose. You have management accounting for a certain purpose. You have external reporting for a certain purpose. And all of those different use cases are targeted to different needs, but they're all running on the same foundation of high quality information and internal controls and governance. And so what you get with that is you get this very efficient process for capturing information with strong internal controls and then serving that information up for the right purpose that's tailored for the user. That's where I think we need to get to with sustainability information. But to answer your question about assurance, I think assurance plays a very important role. And we always use the word reliable. So the word we use at the Value Reporting Foundation, and especially vis-a-vis the SASB standards, is comparable, consistent, and reliable information. And what we mean when we say reliable is subject to strong systems of internal controls and strong board governance and oversight. And that means beginning to think about sustainability information as important as financial information. And the minute you start thinking like that, then right away, the next question is, well, what about assurance? And I do think over time, we're going to see this information assured. I think there will be increasing, well, leading companies are already assuring it, but I think there will be increasing pull from investors and very importantly from directors, boards of directors and audit committees of directors who, as they understand that investors are using this information, will want to see it assured.
And I can definitely attest to the fact that we are starting to get more interest, and it is something we are working with our clients to understand what it means to have assurance, how a company can get ready for that, and what that process looks like from their auditor. So I think it's really important, to your point, for the reliability of information. And just to go back to your point on information and how it is used differently by different users and for different purposes, how do you see the standards and kind of the reporting helping to close the gap between what investors are expecting in terms of information and what preparers are willing and able to give, whether that be on performance metrics related to sustainability or even in the financial statements themselves?
Yeah. So that's the value of standards in my mind. That's why I have always felt that generally accepted standards for sustainability disclosure were essential in this space, because what standard setting does and what a good standard setting process does is it develops consensus around what will be disclosed. And it has input from investors, it has input from companies. And remember, neither investors aren't a monolith, companies aren't a monolith, but a good standard setting process will have input from investors, from companies, from subject matter experts. And ultimately, what will come out of that is some general agreement about what will be disclosed. To me, that is why standards are the ultimate solution here. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to get exactly what they want. It doesn't mean every investor will get exactly what they want. It won't mean that every company will be 100% just completely satisfied with the standards. But what happens is everyone will respect the process and agree to live with the outcome of the process. And that's why I think standards are ultimately the solution here. What it does mean, and this is an important, I think ultimately going to be a very important cultural change for both companies and investors. If you think about the financial accounting standards analogy, businesses are used to participating in accounting standards development processes. Now, typically there's an accounting policy shop. The accounting policy shop is used to engaging in the accounting standards development process. I do think it's going to be a real cultural change for both businesses and investors to allocate those resources to engage in sustainability standards development in the same way they've historically engaged in financial accounting standards development.
Yeah, and we are already starting to see the beginnings of that. The concept of an ESG controller has been coming out. We've been seeing more job descriptions written in that way. And I do tell my clients it's really important to be able to write your policies that you are following and having those documented, as well as engaging with the standard setters to make sure that they're fit for your purpose to be able to tell the story that you are trying to tell as well. So Janine, in light of the announcement of the International Sustainability Standards Board together and really this monumental movement towards convergence, what should companies be doing? How should they be thinking about it?
So the number one thing companies should not be doing is stopping progress. It's important to continue to think about how to improve your reporting and prepare ultimately for the ISSB standards. And the ISSB and the IFRS Foundation has been very, very clear that they will build on existing standards and frameworks. They heard that loud and clear in the responses to consultations, that both companies and investors did not want there to be significant change and to really leverage what they've already started to use. So companies should continue to move forward on implementing the SASB standards, the integrated reporting framework, TCFD, because that will serve companies in good stead as the ISSB standards are put into place.
And I know we can't have a conversation without talking about the regulators. So just wondering what your thought about the role of regulation in all of the reporting and disclosure around sustainability is.
I think regulation is important. I think it's an accelerator of progress, but regulation tends to react to two things. It either reacts to a crisis or it reacts to market demand. I think what is very unique about this current situation, and particularly the formation of the ISSB, which has the support of regulators, IOSCO, is that it is clearly a reaction to market demand and demand from investors. So that's really exciting to have a demand-driven solution before you have a crisis. That's terrific. But I do think that I do think there's huge power in market-led solutions to create the conditions for regulators to ultimately act. And I think when we think about the next few years, it's not an either or, it's a both and. It is a very strong market support for the ISSB from both investors and companies, and then kind of top-down support and advocacy for the ISSB standards from regulators around the world.
So bringing it back to the practical, what is the one thing you would advise businesses to do today to tackle climate change?
On climate, I think the single most important thing business leaders can do is integrate climate into strategy. And I think of it in two ways. There is thinking of it, and this sounds a little overly simplistic, but broadly it is thinking about climate as a strategy issue through the lens of products and services, and how are there risks or opportunities related to a business's products and services. And then there's thinking about climate through the lens of operations and how operations need to be adapted around climate change. And I think if you think of it through those two lenses and then integrate it into your core strategy, and then ultimately develop targets and metrics based on those strategic objectives, I think that is the most powerful way to drive progress on climate.
Well, thank you so much again, Janine, for taking the time. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to what the ISSB has for us in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.